Good evening, everyone. I'm Diane Fitzgerald, and on behalf of Ecoanxiety Down East and our co-sponsors, Sierra Club Maine and the Peace and Justice Center of Eastern Maine, I welcome you to our 5th class in our 9-week course, Eco-Anxiety and the Pandemic. And tonight's class is titled, Letting Our Eco-Anxiety Transform Us, Part 1. So just a few requests before we begin. If everyone could keep themselves on mute during the class. And if you have questions or comments for our speaker, if you would please use the chat function to send a message to Leslie. Leslie, when she gets a chance, will send you a message so you'll see who to send it to. And if you would please send your questions only to Leslie and not to everyone. And if you have any technical problems, feel free to send Leslie a message using chat. Tonight I'd like to turn the mic over to Suzanne Barrett, a member of the Ecoanxiety Down East, to introduce tonight's speaker. Suzanne?
Thank you, Diane. Hello, everyone. I'm Suzanne Barrett, and tonight I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, Newell Louie, who has been following the traditional ways of the Passamaquoddy people for over 30 years and is currently the Culture and Language Program Manager for Wabanaki Public Health. He earned a Master's of Science in Linguistics with a focus on Indigenous language from MIT and has taught Passamaquoddy culture classes at the University of Maine at Machias. In addition to serving 2 terms as a counselor for the Passamaquoddy Pleasant Point tribe, Newell has devoted his life to volunteerism as an organizer for sacred runs with a purpose to unite the Wabanaki people, and as a coach for the Native American Olympic Games, just to name a few. I'm sure we'll all be inspired after our time with Newell tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Newell Louie.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Diane. Pleasure to be here, and hopefully we'll share some space and time together here tonight, and hopefully we'll all get something from it. In preparing for the class tonight, I know I already did get something from it. You know, a perspective that I've had, but also a revisit to some of those perspectives, because sometimes we lose focus, we get too busy in our lives and too stretched too thin, and we don't have time to focus on some of the important things that we should or could, I won't say should, we could focus on for the betterment of all of society and our earth. So with that, I'm just going to bring up a little presentation. Can everybody see that okay, I hope? And I think I'm doing this correctly. Looks right. I teach classes online on Zoom, but what a strange platform to be teaching and presenting on. But in the current situation that we're in, this is the most effective and most safe way to connect with people throughout our land. So with that, I just want to do a little brief introduction, and so I'll go ahead with that. Dungaplu Tidewen, Newell Louie, Nadliwis, Beskutumukad Nil, Nagujayao Zibaik, Madak Miguk Naganegotkuk, Makadi Niwik Digej, Nagadi Westupin. So what I'm saying there is that I'm saying hello to everyone here tonight. My name is Newell Louie. I am a Passamaquoddy tribal citizen, and I come from Zibayik, Madak Miguk, and Nagutkuk. My dad was born in Zibayik. He moved to Madak Miguk, Indian Township, and my mother was from Negudkuk. They have passed, but I still honor them and look at them for guidance and make sure that I speak of them very highly. And then I said, Buna Mukarigni Wigdigej, I live in Pembroke now, Pembroke, Maine, which Buna Mukarig is the place of the frostfish. And the frostfish run here in the Pennamequan River in January. So that's a Passamaquoddy name for this area that I live in. And Gidi West to West, Gidi West Dupen is that I want to speak with you tonight and share some information. And as it was mentioned, I am a linguist. So before we get going, I just want to make sure that we can understand each other, or you can understand where I'm coming from and where I'm at. And so I like to just tell people my difference between the two words, think and believe. And I do that just because one of my mentors, and he's passed as well. I must mean I'm getting old. His name was John Trudell, and he would harp on believing and thinking. So the process of thinking is an active process, and the process of believing is passive. And if you'll notice the way I spelled believe, I capitalized 3 letters in there in the middle of the word. And sometimes that's the way I think about that, just because, we can't say we just believe something, right? And I think my next slide explains that a little bit more. So we just can't take things at face value sometimes, right? And so tonight when I'm talking, I don't want you to believe anything that I'm saying. I just want you to think about it. Because thinking about things, that's how change happens, right? And the example I was going to use was, if you believe back in 1845, women were incapable of voting, right? That was a belief by some at the time. Of course, there was a movement that started at that time as well to allow, to get the women to have the right to vote. It took 75 years, and it happened in 1920. And the point of that is, if that belief is here in this whole, then I ask you to think about something here. People have a hard time breaking away from those beliefs that they may have to even think about women being able to vote, Blacks being able to vote, and Natives being able to vote, because that doesn't fit their belief system. So throughout time, we've had to alter the way we do things. So I like to think about things, and if somebody brings something to me or tells me something, it's not that I don't believe them. And my dad or my mom or somebody like that would tell me something, I most certainly have taken them at face value. But the point of it is, some of the issues that we have presented to us are not what they seem to be. So, if we think, and we're going to go into history a little bit more in a few minutes, but I just want to make sure we get that out there so that we understand, that you understand, or can hear me anyway, that's saying I don't want you to believe what I tell you. I just want you to think about things. And this particular, and we're going to get back to that in a few minutes, but so this is the document that I was looking up because, I said eco-anxiety in the pandemic, letting our eco-anxiety transform us. I said, well, what is that? And since I don't know when that was, late spring. We've been looking at this. So I did a little bit of research as to what it is, and and I can see and I can read what it is, and I will read it, but I just want to make sure that we have, hold on, I gotta move a little box here. There we go. This is what the charge that was given to me to present on. Eco-anxiety or climate anxiety has been described as by the American Psychological Association in 2017 as a chronic fear of environmental doom. It is associated with a growing awareness of the many direct and indirect effects of individual lives stemming from extreme weather events, rising sea levels, floods, forest fires, personal loss of livelihood or housing. And that statement is just devastating to people that, have these anxieties. And a lot of people have a lot of anxieties over many things. So it went on further to say that people have, and I'm not going to read you a bunch of slides tonight. I just have like 3 or 4 that I want to get out there, so we have a feel for what's happening. And people have begun expressing feelings of helplessness and fear about their future. The anxiety this generates can lead to immobilization, manic reactivity, exhaustion, insomnia, depression, substance abuse, and suicide. Eco-anxiety refers to a fear of environmental damage to our ecological disorder. This sense of anxiety is largely based on the current and predicted future state of the environment and human-induced climate change. And as the world grapples with the devastation and destabilization of the coronavirus, as well as the waves of protest demanding justice for George Floyd and calling to an end of the systemic racism that inflicted centuries of oppression, there has been a proliferation of literature drawing parallels between the pandemic climate crisis and environmental justice. So my assignment was to change the world. We have to change the metaphor. And to change the metaphor, we need to experience ourselves and the world in different ways. Instead of seeing nature as there for our exploitation, we learn to see the earth as alive, as a self-organizing cosmos, as independent and is not separate from us. The presenter, I guess me, will be offering teachings on the Wabanaki sense of kinship in the natural world. So that was a lot, but that was basically, some of the background into what I was going to be presenting. So, you've heard Native Americans talk about, or you've heard maybe a reference to thinking about the earth as their mother. And the earth is our mother, our sacred mother. And, when I think about my own mother, right, and what was afforded me as a child, to the best of her ability, she provided me with food, water, shelter, heat. And that is also what the earth provides to all of us, right? So you can't distinguish, or I can't distinguish the difference between my mother earth and my mother. So I have to think about it in those terms. And I want to think about also what happened here, right? And I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but we had a little mention about systemic racism, right? So poor people have throughout history been the victims of every kind of ecological devastation that you can imagine. They don't build gas-fired power plants in affluent neighborhoods. They put them where colored people are, where poor people live, and those environmental dangers are an added responsibility that we have to put up with as citizens of the world. We have they've dammed up our rivers here in Maine, And these are the lifeblood of the Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, the Maliseet, and the Micmac. Was our mode of transportation. We always lived on the rivers. We that was our most prolific form of navigation, was the river system, and we could transcend across Maine, up and down, including New Brunswick and the St. John River Valley, and into western New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. The Wabanakis cover a vast area, right? But that has been that of course has changed, and with that has been a loss of land. Not that we ever owned land, we didn't. We used our land, but with these dammings of our rivers, what happened then was an ecological disaster. So my great grandfather, his name was Toma Louis, and he had some sons, and one of them was my great great grandfather, Athian. And together they had an island up in the what they call the Grand Fall flowage on the St. Croix River, and it was called Louis Island, named after my great grandfather. And they had a village there. I'm not sure exact size of that island, but then they went ahead and started industrializing the St. Croix. So they put forward these dams, the Grand Falls Dam, and Grand Falls isn't because it's huge or tall, it's because it's long in length. But what happened was they called the Grand Fall flowage is the backwater from that dam, which flooded my ancestors' island. And so they had to move to the mainland in Princeton across the bridge, which is now Indian Township. And actually it's called Tomalui Highway. So, displacement from the things that we do, right, is just a tip of the iceberg as well, because what happens is that forested land that's flooded is not longer going to be forest. It's not going to be grass. It's not going to be creating carbon, right? So we're just diminishing those things. So with that loss of land or loss of use, we have ecological devastation. And if you think about the Penobscots and what happened with them during their treaty making process, they were afforded all of the islands in the Penobscot River, except for Marsh Island, which is the biggest island in the Penobscot River. It hosts the University of Maine of Orono, and the town of Orono is part of that. Town of Stillwater is part of that. Town of Old Town is part of that. So that was not included. And what happened there was that the sorry, I told my volume was low. Hopefully that's better. So what happened with Marsh Island is that the stem of the Marsh Island is kind of shaped like this, and on one side is the Penobscot River, and the other branch of water that comes from the Penobscot back to the Penobscot is called Stillwater River. So it wasn't in the Penobscot. Anyway, that was pretty devastating as well to the Penobscot tribe. And then, like I said, with all of these things that happen with deforestation, now they want to try to correct that with carbon credits, carbon offsets. So the pollution isn't any less, but they want to buy acreage of trees to try and offset the pollution, which doesn't really make sense to me. But these are all contributing factors to what's happening with our climate today. And I think of it a little bit as like genocide or ecocide. And I think this is what we're doing to ourselves, or is this what we're doing to ourselves? Are we making those changes? And when we think about what's happening with our Earth, right? The Earth is going to be here, right? It will survive. It will take back everything that we've done to it and everything that we've put on it. And if you took a airport tarmac and abandoned that, you know, within 75 years, you wouldn't even know that that was a tarmac or that existed. And then some of the structures that are built will only last for 50 to 200 years. So I'm not sure what's happening with my volume. And he said it's better now, so maybe it's maybe I'm blocking it or something. So you know, if you left the Earth alone now, what would happen is it would take itself back. It would take everything that we've done to it, and it would heal itself. That mother would take care of herself. You know, but we have these trash barges that are dumped in our oceans for minimal fines. You know, we have disposable everything, and then also we have our cars that are running on a fuel system that is over 100 years old. You know, there must be technology out there that's better, and I think it is getting better a little bit, but you know, the big money can control a lot of what's going on. So the pandemics and the Passamaquoddy, right? That's how I would call my tribe or my people. So I told you we're going to talk a little bit about history, and I like to say his story because that's who's been writing the history throughout the centuries. Right? It's been written by non-native men and non-native. You know, a lot of the documents that were developed to colonize were developed by rich white men. So, in the original Constitution, we the people did not include me, did not include women, did not include blacks, and did not include men who weren't landowners. And I just like to put that out there because it affects who we are today and where we've come from. Because that's what we have to think about. Where did we come from and why are we here?
No, we're having problems with the audio again.
Okay.
So I don't know if you can try another adjustment on your end, and we'll just try to work this out.
My volume is up. I don't think. Is that better?
We can try it. It sounds a little spotty, but we can try it.
Okay. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not sure what to do. I mean, like I said, I teach class, and usually there's no problems. My volume is up. Hold on, let me look at my.
And it's not everyone, Noel. I can hear you fine. So some people are having trouble hearing. Not everyone's. Hard to determine what the reason for that is.
Okay. Yeah, it says all of my volumes are up. Actually, I don't even know if there's a mic volume on here, but. Okay, so I'll continue, I guess, and hopefully we'll be able to hear it. So a little bit of history, right? So 13,000 years ago are when the Passamaquoddy are dated back in this area, and many decades ago it was 10,000 years, 8,000 years, then it went to 10,000, and now there's carbon dating putting us here 13,000 years ago. And I like just to preface that a little bit by saying that, I think we've been here. We were always here. And I can tell you that because our ancestors are here and they speak to me. Ancestors passed on all of the values, beliefs, morals, and the sense of importance of 7 generations. So we have to be able to look at 7 generations in the past, 7 generations in the future. So when I think about the things that I do today, I'm thinking about those great-great-grandchildren that are not yet born, right? 7 generations away from me. There's 3 behind me, but there's 4 more behind them. What are we going to leave them? What are we going to leave them? And is it our responsibility? And if we think about this pandemic, why us? Why now? Well, that's why, because it's our responsibility to do something about what's going on. Why is the earth suffering the way it is? Why us? Why now? Because it's our responsibility to do something about that as well. So my ancestors passed on the culture, the language, ceremonies, the drumming and celebration, talking circles, and everything that's sacred that they passed on to me. Tools for survival and coping with all of our situations. And that's what they passed down.
Newell?
Yes.
This is Leslie. So I'm wondering, even though like I have stable internet, we're not that far apart geographically, but I wonder if maybe if you cut out your video, maybe that might help the audio. If maybe there's some kind of Wi-Fi issue going on up where you are, you can try cutting out your video.
How do I do that?
You go in, I wonder if we can do it. Let me see if I can cut out your video for you. I'm going to stop your video. All right, now try talking.
Okay.
Sounds clear. Much
Tools
better.
for surviving and coping with situations. Yep.
Yep,
Yeah.
much better. Okay.
Okay. So can you still see my screen or no?
Yes,
Yeah,
we can see your screen perfectly.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So these ancestors have passed on the tools for survival and for coping with all those situations that confront us. And this is what has shaped us or shaped me. So what happens with intergenerational, even like today, some of the psychologists talk about intergenerational trauma, intergenerational healing. And that's what I'd like to focus on, right? That intergenerational connection, so that, if you think back 40 generations, you may know something that person knew because it was passed down from one generation to the next. The Passamaquoddy language was passed down for thousands of generations, and it's just newly developed as a written language now. It's been written for over 100 years, and it's been formalized only in the past 55 years or so. So there's something to be said about intergenerational learning. So where do we live? Earth? Yes, all of us live on Earth, right? But what about the Passamaquoddies, right? And I'm just talking about them. There's other tribes that are out there in the U.S., etc., that also we all have similar issues, but they've taken the Passamaquoddy or all the tribal people of the U.S. and placed them right on reservations. So if you think back to pre-colonial contact, it's been estimated, because nobody really knows, that there were between 12 and 20 million, and some estimates are high as 60 million tribal people in the United States. And now we are at about 6 million, or 2% of the population. And other factors, what happened with the diminishing of the Passamaquoddy or the tribal citizens of the U.S. is that once the U.S. settled land, the more they settled, the lower the numbers got for our tribes. So they put us on reservations. And what are reservations, right? Those are lands that are probably not the most pristine places to be, although we've made the best of every situation that we have. So we have these places, and Zabayik is maybe very, a very small place. Madakmaguk is much, much bigger, but this is where we're at. So I got to tell you that, I was mentioned that I did a lot of coaching and running and things like that. And I got to tell you a little story about the Tarahumara runners. Because the relevance here is that, we all do things in our lives, and each of us in society have things that are expected of us. So the Tarahumara runners are native runners in the Copper Canyons of Mexico, and they run. That's their only mode of transportation is running, and sometimes they cover between 40 and 90 miles a day on foot in what they call tire tread sandals that are strapped to their feet. So in this book I was reading, they were talking about the Tarahumara, and some guy said, well, wouldn't they be awesome in a ultra marathon, a sanctioned road race? And so they went and recruited some Tarahumara runners and gave them, outfitted them with clothing, and then they gave them these fancy running shoes. And they entered them in the Western States 100, which is a prestigious ultra marathon that's held in the, I'm not sure if it's Colorado or Nevada, but somewhere out there. And they entered them in, and this guy that was sponsoring them knew that they would do very well. So they fixed them up with some shoes, but by the 20-mile point, the Tarahumaras couldn't wear the shoes anymore. They took them off and put their tire tread sandals back on and kept on going. So these sponsors expected them to win this Western States 100 race. And then at about 92 miles into the run, they were up in the front, a couple of them, and then they just stopped and lifted their, I'm not sure what they were called. They were just capes that were draped over them and loincloths. They stopped, they sat down, and they started to roll a cigarette. And what happened was the guy says, "Oh, you're going to win the race. Why are you stopping now?" And the Tarahumara runner says, "Well, it's time to smoke." And they did not care if they won the race or not, but they knew what they did, right? That they had to keep up some of their traditions. So it's not what people expect of you, right, that matters. It's what you expect of yourself. And that's the point of that story is, right, you got to be true to yourself, and you got to do things that are right for you. And so the Tarahumara don't run for glory. They're running for their life, right? They have a big race in the Copper Canyon as well. And they go out and they've won that almost every time it's been run. And I think the prize for winning it is $3,000. And what happens there is that they run for their life because that $3,000 will buy them goats and feed their family for a whole year. So they are motivated, right? So I'm talking about the Passamaquoddy and the pandemic, right? The Passamaquoddies has endured, as well as other native tribes have endured. I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit because I just want to mention this before I go back, that the Eurasian diseases such as influenza, pneumonia, plagues, and smallpox, there's a devastated the Skijinawug, which is native tribes, who did not have immunity to them. Conflict and outright warfare with the Western European newcomers reduced populations and disrupted traditional societies. So Passamaquoddies weren't any different. So in the early 1800s, there was outbreaks of smallpox at Matakwinkwag. There were 3 waves of smallpox between 1800 and 1850. Sorry. And what happened there was that we took care of our own. And I say Gordon's Island because it's an island that's two miles into Big Lake away from the reservation. And the people self-quarantined because they did not want to devastate their tribal communities any more than what was going on. So once they knew that they were sick, they would go ahead and self-quarantine by going over to Gordon's Island. So we need to adopt to our environment as to what's happening, right? The Passamaquoddy survived. There's been a lot of devastation throughout the history, and if you look at native history, if you look at real native history, right? And when I taught at the university, what I would talk about in terms of like that history is when I was a kid in the 60s, I was reading about these devastating native Indian savages. And and I went to an all-white school. So I was sitting there reading this stuff and studying these things and thinking, wow, that's really horrible, till I got to know more. And now I'm working with the Maine Department of Education to right some of these wrongs for future generations. So with our pandemic, right, and our environment that's happening, right, we have these happening simultaneous, and it's our responsibility to do things for our communities, for our earth, and for all of our citizens, families, friends, etc. No matter what, right, no matter what happens. And people have the ability to do that, but you got to be creative, right? And so a way to be creative is like if I took somebody and put them out into the wilderness and drop them off, chances are they are going to survive because they are going to be innovative in terms of how to do shelter, how to do food, how to do water, right? They're going to know how to do those things. So we're going to have to, we'll find a way to adapt to our new surroundings if that's what it comes to. And when I think about eco-anxiety, right, people can say, well, it's going to be devastating not to have these super droughts, wildfires, etc. And how are we ever going to survive? When you think about the floods that just happened in Louisiana and Texas, and the one woman was saying, well, it happened, 3 times in her lifetime. And she said, we'll rebuild. And that's they think about, those sort of things in terms of like, well, this is the environment that we're in. So we have to find a way to adapt. And we have to do more. We have to be able to think about what's happening around us. So we have to adapt to our environment. We really have to adapt to our environment. I was looking at, I have some friends in the Southwest, in Tucson, Arizona, which is not far from Phoenix. And Phoenix's average temperature for the month of July was 108 degrees. And I'm thinking, man, how could you survive, right? But people find a way to survive. And it's not the optimum way to deal with eco-devastation. The optimum way is to make changes in your life and show the way for others to be able to make those same changes. Live with the earth, right? Take what the earth will give you. And don't overtax it. You know, we try to live here on the land, my wife and I, we try to live here on the land that we are on. We have a huge garden. It's a lot of work. We work at it every day. We just, you know, Maine has been experiencing a drought this year, but we have to find a way to do that. Find a way to continue on with living the way we need to live. And we have to be able to show people that it's okay, and understand also, you know, be compassionate that there are people that have eco-anxiety, that do get paralyzed and they can't do anything. Those are the people that we need to stand up for. You know, our ancestors survived, and every day I wake up and I'm still Passamaquoddy, and there isn't anything I can do about it. I have to live with that, and that's a whole different presentation on being Native in the world that we're in, but I'm there. I wake up every day and I'm still Passamaquoddy. So I have to deal with that systemic racism that exists today in our society. And now it's being promoted, sanctioned from the top down. But that's another seminar too. So at the end of the day, right, what we get done, that's all we could do for the day. And likewise, at the end of your life, what you get done that's all you could do as well. So don't despair. We're doing what we can do. And I don't want you to think that's not a suggestion to be a bystander. Rather, it means standing up for our earth, for our rights, our morals, and for people who need you, and to be kind. Nurture and nourish the people around you by creating and sustaining a community of care, joy, and connection. Because we are connected on this planet, no matter what we do, right? They say that saying of when a butterfly flaps its wings, well, it's true in a sense that we all have an effect on one another. And I think of this, and I'll just add that I have what I call like a mean theory as well, right? And by that, I'm saying, mean what you say what you mean, but don't be mean when you say it. Thank you very much. And I'm hoping to have some questions. And if not, I really appreciate the time you've offered me. And I'm very sorry for the audio difficulties that we had. And I'm not sure why that happened. Like I said, I teach twice a week on this platform and usually don't have any problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Newell. This is Diane speaking. And I just want to reassure you that once you turned off the video, the sound was fine. So
Okay.
I really think it was a slight internet problem, bandwidth issue.
Yep.
And that is one of the challenges of living in rural America, right?
Yes,
that
absolutely.
we do not have access to the internet that we need to, especially in this time of everybody relying on it so heavily, from school children to people working and people teaching and people offering Zoom seminars in the evening. So thank you for being willing to tolerate the frustration of it. And I assure you that it came through very clearly as soon as you turned off your video. We heard everything and really didn't miss much at all. So thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Appreciate
yeah.
that.
And you know, we have a chance now for any questions or comments to Newell, which can be sent to Leslie in the chat, and Leslie can pose them. But you know, I just wanted to offer my own appreciation for your deep sense of community, how you started off with just a touching respect for your parents and for your teacher. And it just comes through in the way you talk, how deeply connected you feel to others and how much you feel their support, even from the people who are no longer here on walking the earth with you. And I just found that such a beautiful reminder of one of the most important themes in this whole course is our interdependence and our connection and support for community. And you were really the first person in this course to bring that out so poignantly. So I thank you for that. And I know it comes from your tradition, but also I think it comes from you individually, from your heart, and it's very, very palpable. So Leslie's messaging me that she has some questions, so I'm going to let her take over here.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you so much, Newell, for your patience with the technical issues tonight. It's been one of those nights, boy, oh boy. So we have a question from the audience that someone would like to know, what has the Passamaquoddy tribe done to deal with the pandemic?
What has the Passamaquoddy tribe, just like most communities, has tried to stem the spread of any COVID within the community. We now have a gated community, and we did that because I'm telling you about Gordon's Island earlier, where we're so closely connected within this Passamaquoddy tribe that once a person gets infected at the tribe, it is going to spread like you wouldn't believe. Today it's one person, and within 4 weeks it's going to be 10 cousins, and in another 4 weeks it's going to be 50 cousins, or friends or family or whatever. And not that people don't take it seriously, but that interconnection that the tribe has and the tribal citizens have with one another is just so close and so overwhelming.
Thank you, Newell. Very nice offering, and to let us know what's happening up there for you folks. Someone else from the audience would like to know if you could please talk a little bit more about your experience with intergenerational connections and learning.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So there, and like I said, the language, for example, is something that's been passed on for thousands of years, 13,000. For example, and it was never written, but it was always learned and passed down, and that's the way English is learned as well, right? For kids under 5 years old or under 3 years old or whatever, they start to understand commands. So if you talk to any Passamaquoddy that's probably 45 or 50 years old or older, they're going to know all of those imperatives to sit down, be quiet, eat your dinner, close the door, shut off the light, any of those things that happen. So those things come through, right? But also I want to say that about 8 years ago, I say, you think about natives as being, wow, we love Mother Earth. And I do love Mother Earth, I do. But you also think about being able to do basketry. Now that just does not happen, right? You have to learn that as a skill. So as growing up as a kid, I worked with my dad, my mom, and some of my brothers and sisters in terms of like basketry. But what I did was I went out into the woods to cut the ash tree. I came home, I peeled the ash tree, I pounded the ash tree to loosen the rings and make the weavers for the basket. But I never really made the baskets. I did all of the prep work up to the actual making of the basket. So about 8 years ago, my sister said, hey, well, did you want to make a pat basket? I'm like, I've never done that. I said, but yeah, let's give it a go. And those innate things just came to me because, I think that, my ancestors were there guiding my hands, but also I had that knowledge that has been passed down from generation to generation um, um, to make a pack basket. And I did finish it. It was beautiful. It was incredible pack basket, maybe like 20 inches tall or something like that. And I gave it away to a friend of mine. But and then, if you think about the language, and I always go back to language being a linguist, but I also have dreams now where I can hear my great grandfather or my great grandmother speaking, and they're telling me. It's almost like you're in the room with them, but they're telling you to do something or to look at something in the language, and you hear a word that you've never heard before. And now I have that word for my own vocabulary. And when I talk to some of the elders in my community, they're like, wow, I haven't heard that in, 30 years. And I had never heard it. This was not my mom or dad talking. This was my grandparents. And I only knew one grandparent for 5 years. So, and she was, she passed away in 1963. So there's things that are carried through, right? And it's not just me or not just Passamaquoddy. We've all done it, right? We all have things. You all have these things that we believe, and maybe we don't even know why we believe them. And I'm saying believe, right? Because I have beliefs, and I'm not saying that everything you hear you should not believe. What I'm saying is that the things that we think about, right, that we have to understand, are there, and they're things that that are passed down from prior generations. I don't know if that's helpful or not. That was a long answer for a short question. Sorry.
No, that's really, really good stuff. So another question from the floor.
Yep.
What cultural practices make Native Americans so resilient?
Well, that's a complicated question. Our people have endured a lot of things, and I'm not saying we endured more than anybody else, but we have, we were nearly wiped out as a race. If we're talking the low end of those estimates at 12 million people, and now we're at 6 million. No, that's over half. I'm sure it was much more than that. The disease and pandemics devastated our tribal citizens. So we've had to endure a lot. We've had to find ways to take care of ourselves, by people self-quarantining at Gordon's Island, for example, living on a land that wasn't suitable for farming anymore. Not that we were farmers, but we could grow some things. And then not being able to migrate and fish in the summer and then move inland in the winter. Those things, you find a way to adapt, where family units would get together and live inland in the wintertime. And then people would move back to the summer home, not home, but the summer place where they could fish and, dry meats and fish for the upcoming winters. So we found a way to do all of that while maintaining our culture, our language, raising our kids, and making sure that our children also understood the importance of ceremony, where they get their names, how they grieve their lost loved ones and things like that. So the resilience has been there. We've been, I grew up in a time where we had no running water until I was 12 years old. I'm only 62, right? So you think back in late 60s, we were in a house with no running water, no insulation, 2 wood stoves. So we were cutting and burning a lot of wood. But we didn't know, or I didn't know I was poor, and I didn't know how hard my life was. And I tried to make things different for my children. And I think that's what happens with society as it evolves, is you hoping and praying for the next generation, and in my case 7 generations, but you want your kids and your grandkids to have a different and better life maybe than you had, or maybe you had a wonderful life and you want them to have the same. But we try to think about a lot of those things that can affect our future.
So I think we have time for one last question. Someone from the floor would like to know if you have any experience with Buddhism, and if you do, what is your experience with Buddhism?
I'm sorry, I do not have any experience with Buddhism. I do appreciate Buddhism for what it is. I do appreciate people who follow Buddhism. I think about Buddhism or any other, I want to say religion, but and the practice that people use to find peace in their lives. I appreciate that very much, because I think of myself as having a center wheel within my body. And if I take care of my physical and mental side of that wheel, and then I also have a spiritual side, which could be Native American, my beliefs, or it could be Buddhism, Catholicism, or whatever it is, that has to have some equal weight to that, along with the physical and mental side, and then intellect is also on there as well. So we have to feed all of those systems within ourselves to find the balance that we have, that we need to be somewhat stable, I guess, if for lack of a better word, to feel whole, I guess. Because if one of them, if you're just practicing a lot of physical activity, and maybe you're a weightlifter, a bodybuilder, or whatever, those other ones get neglected, and then all of a sudden that wheel is out of balance. So I appreciate that everyone could have a little bit of spiritual side to them.
Thank you. That's all we have for questions.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you once again, Newell. And I'm just really struck by the long history of eco-insecurity and pandemic that you explained. It was very motivating to me to hear about that from your perspective, and how it has been met with adaptation and commitment and community. So it was a very inspiring presentation. I know everyone tonight joins me in thanking you for being here with us. And before you all leave, we're going to share one final screen here with information. And Newell has his contact information up there with his PowerPoint, but if you, maybe we can stop sharing your PowerPoint, Newell, and then
Yep.
Leslie will put up the final screen. Great, we get to see you. Hi.
Hi.
And yeah, and so we'll put up this final information and leave this screen up for a few minutes so that everyone can look at it, get whatever information you need off of it. And I just want to let everyone know that there will be no class next Monday in honor of Labor Day, but we will be back again on Monday, September 14th, with the next class in this series. So no class next Monday, but next class on September 14th. And thank you again, everyone, and good night, and take care.
Yeah, I
Thank
want
you,
to thank
Stephanie.
everyone for their time, energy, and participation. I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaste, Noel.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Wow.
Appreciate you all.
And Noah, if you want to stay on for a few minutes, once everyone gets what they need off of this final screen, then the tech team that supports this course, we can just talk for a couple minutes. So if we can hang on to you for a few more minutes, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks. Mm-hmm.
And thank you, Diane, and all the tech teams. I've enjoyed re-listening to all the recordings.
Thank you, Eric, and that's
Okay,
it.
I'm sorry we had the audio difficulties.
I think it's really minor, Newell, and we have recorded, and everyone, it's a reminder that you can listen to these talks, recorded versions
Okay.
of them, and the link to the recordings appears in your email
Yes.
that gives you
Thank you,
the Zoom
Suzanne.
information.